Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast, and welcome back a man who was on the podcast. I'm just trying to work out. I think it was early October 2025.
Yeah, I think so. About
It
then.
was,
Yeah.
It was a phenomenal conversation. So much so that he's come back. He
Oh my
couldn't stay
gosh.
away.
Well, he paid me a
Mis-
lot of money. Paid me a lot of money. So it's
Well,
big
it's
money.
it's but it's all value, mate. It's all value. It's the momentum that's being generated. Mr. Mark Howley, welcome back to the podcast, my friend.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Again, the name's Mark Howley, and I enjoyed our conversation last time, and I thought that we touched on some pretty cool subjects. And I feel like when you get into sales, there's so many avenues, and if you've done it all your life and you've had success, every time you talk about it, you can find a whole nother avenue to talk about.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think the one that we chatted around about, or I kind of mentioned to you, was what I noticed, and this is coming from the States where commonly people will have relatively large geographic areas if they're in a B2B business.
Mm,
Not all, but I happen to have that where it was multi-state. It might be mid-Atlantic or Southeast or something like that, which may
yeah,
encompass 4 or 5 different states. And with that, in working with younger people, what I have noticed is a reticence to get on the road for fear that they're going to go somewhere and not be productive.
mm,
Or secondly, kind of looking at this area as just this daunting task of, oh my God, what do I do? I've got Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, I've got all the New York, Connecticut. Oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? And
yeah.
in that, they freeze and they just can't organize themselves. And it's always been, I've noticed it all my life, this inertia,
Yeah.
where I'm going to overanalyze. I'm going to analyze everything. Well, you can analyze until the cows come home. But what you need to do is, get out and try to meet customers.
Well, it's
So,
interesting that I mean, and the last time we spoke, we talked about the importance of staying the course. And you've been a CEO and owner for many, many years. You're an entrepreneur. You're now a public speaker and mentor, but also run your own podcast, the Mark Howley Show. And Mark, as you were talking there, I'm thinking back to some of the old movies that I've watched that are based in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s, where you've got the traveling salesperson that
yeah,
had no option but to either get in a car or jump on a plane, and they had to go and travel to meet customers face to
yeah,
face.
yeah, yeah.
Before we talk about some of the, I guess, the nuances of planning and some of the lessons you've learned for your career, how much of the inertia or the challenge do you think young people have today is based on just the amount of technology and information we have available to us that they think, you know what, I can talk to somebody on the other side of, for example, the United States without jumping on a plane, without jumping on a train or jumping in a car. I can just jump on Zoom or Teams. It's easier.
I think that, yes, it is easier and it adds a level of effectiveness to it. I truly believe that it's kind of like for me, um, you know, when we were even younger, before that was, talking on the phone versus communicating by written letter. Well,
Yeah.
obviously, if you could talk on the phone, then you would follow up with a written letter. Or you write a letter and then you hope to get the phone call, whichever, but the target is the phone call.
Mm.
And I do think in most businesses where you're going to be creating a long-term relationship where there could be a lot of money going on and service requirements, that ultimately that face-to-face visit is the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that there aren't great benefits to prior to that meeting or after that meeting using virtual emails and the like. But
Mm.
I would not want to minimize the importance of the human interaction. And I think when I watch today's technology, which is going to be a huge part of it. AI, that's it. How much can you have to keep your humanness in it,
Totally.
you know? You have to take advantage of that one thing that maybe all that other cool stuff can't replace.
Mm.
And that's human just truly sitting with somebody. And that's my point. I guess that's my argument.
It's actually really interesting because the more sales leaders I speak with and the more salespeople that I speak with, they're taking on more and more of AI as an accompaniment to what they do. So getting AI to do a lot of research, sometimes getting AI to help with formulating proposals, not doing it entirely because they still have to make sure they've got the key information around the customer. But the more technology that is getting introduced into the selling cycle, the more it's becoming obvious that at the end of the day, people still want to have the connection with another human being, which is exactly what you're talking about. And my experience is some of the younger salespeople coming through, not all, but some of the younger salespeople coming through have either not been taught I guess, the softer skills to have those human interactions, or they're relying too heavily on the technology to do the heavy lifting. And so when their sales manager comes in and says, "Hey, you need to go and jump in the car, you need to jump on a plane and go and present or go and talk to this buyer, this procurement person, the chief revenue officer, whoever it is your target customer," they almost have this frontal lobotomy to say, "I cannot do that," and they'll look for excuses not to do it and they'll avoid it.
Well, it's natural to not want to go and, when you go see people, you expose yourself to rejection.
Yeah.
And that's very common. Who wants to be rejected? It's, one of the old Brian Tracy psychology of selling, yeah, that's perfectly human natural experience. But in my experience, here's an example. When I was a younger guy, I was trying to find a new market to go into. And it turned out being that in the US, we thought there was an opportunity in the nuts market, that being peanuts, pecans, almonds, pistachios. And let's find out what we can do. At
Mm.
that time in my life, I went down to the Philadelphia Free Public Library on Saturday mornings. I remember it. And I looked it all up and I drew out the country and wrote in how many of these different products they had per state. And then I eventually said, oh, I'm going to go after Alabama and North Carolina.
Hmm.
And it ended up being that I got my first big orders in Alabama, in North Carolina. Now, I could have sped that up 1,000 times with AI. But when you were selling, in my instance, when you're selling capital equipment, which is
Mm.
going to go into somebody's plant and it's going to have an impact on it, and then you're going to sell, in our case, we're filling bags. I'm going to go in there and I'm also going to fill the bags. I cannot imagine how you could do that
Mm.
without human interaction.
Yeah.
And all that human interaction gives you the opportunity to get to know the intricacies of that customer or that
Yeah.
company. And that's just so huge.
Mm.
It's huge in selling, but it's also huge in just being a good person delivering what somebody needs. You learn, that he doesn't like stuff on his right side when he's sitting at the machine. He likes it on the left side. Well, then accommodate that.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you're a younger guy and you're not willing to utilize, we talked about this before we get on, but when you have a larger territory, I've always said that you should try and find six, I would do 5 or 6 pockets, geographic pockets,
Mm.
and you're going to try and rotate through them. And those pockets should generally be set up around maybe a major account or a geographic area that you don't have anything going on in, but you have to get there to find one.
Yeah.
Now, first off, can you stop and look at a map and do that? That means, okay, go to AI and find out where your big client is and do all the things that speed up the assessment of that area. But ultimately, getting there, I don't know how you stop needing to get there.
Mm.
Like that's my observation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with that because you could use the technology similar to you going to the library, right? And looking up books and maybe using what do they call the
Oh yeah, the
fish
microfiche.
microfish
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
things, right?
Zzz. Yeah,
That
that
sort of
crazy
stuff,
stuff.
right?
That's what I was
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah, well now everyone's got the power of, I guess, everything in their hand through that smart device. And I reckon part of it might be laziness, but there's no excuse not for doing the research. But you still need to understand that sales really happens when two people have a connection and we're doing business with those who we know, like, trust, and remember. Now, unless you're selling a commodity product and you don't want to see that customer again, most of us in the B2B space, you want to build a lifetime customer value
Yeah,
relationship,
yeah.
which means you've got to go and eyeball people. So to have that territory, you've got to be planned, you've got to be strategic, and you've got to be intentional. I'm just wondering though, Mark, whether part of the challenge with a lot of younger people, younger salespeople, is the pressure they have from their chief revenue officer or their one-up sales manager to hit the number at all costs. So therefore, they're looking for the lowest part of what's the least path of resistance or
Path of least resistance is, I
yeah,
think, what you're looking for.
yeah,
That's
that's
what we
it.
call it here in the United States. I don't know if that's what you do in Australia. We call
Yeah,
it
that
the
does. I
path
just
of
got my
least
words around the
resistance.
wrong way. The path
No,
of least resistance. That's it.
I think that, it's interesting you say that because the company that bought me and I now train their salespeople, and I've done that now for 5 years. Um, you hear a lot of that,
Mm,
the heat's coming down. Well, let's just say the heat will always come down. So that's a constant.
yeah.
Now, we can't stop that. So how can we try to manage that? Well, the question then becomes is, are you going to spend your life grabbing at things in the hopes that it brings you a rapid thing?
Mm,
I would argue that most industries have a sales cycle. In when I was in the packaging business, it was about a year.
yeah.
If you were going to get in to meet somebody and just take our example, oh, I want to sell you a package. Well, we have to find out, well, what design do you like?
Mm,
Okay. And then you start to find, you may know what they do now, but they may want a new design. Well, now there's questions as to how that design would be put together. Oh, what product are you going to put in it? Well, you may
mm,
know, but they want it to be a little skinnier bag or a bigger bag, and that may impact how it looks on the shelf.
mm.
There's a lot that goes on in there. And are you prudent enough to know how to move them through that project? But at the same time, following the way they want to go. They may
Mm.
be, the old saying is they may be some, not some, but they may be somebody who's all technical, you know, exactly what's that bag made of? Exactly what material? Well, you go that path, but eventually we're going to have to get back to what color do you want it?
Yes.
But so though, to me, that's where you're creating, by the nature of the sales cycle, the reason for multiple visits.
Mm.
And I think that people don't think that through. The younger ones, it seems like they're trying to get all the information fast. And it's not because I think sometimes lazy. I just think it's inexperience.
Mm.
Just it's kind of like the river moves at a certain speed. You can't push it, you know?
Well, it's interesting. It's a universal law, just like the law of sowing and reaping, the law of gestation. Certain things have a certain gestation period, and no matter
Yeah.
how hard you try, you cannot change it. A carrot is going to
Yeah.
grow in a certain amount of time.
Well, we used to have people who would come in and they would say things like, I want to buy, a 500,000 bags and I want to get the order in right now because I have to have them in 8 weeks. And you would say, whoa, 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 wait a minute. Something's wrong.
Mm.
It's like the girl. She's just She's a little too easy to win over. And you think, wait a minute, maybe I'm not the only winner. And, it's like this order comes in so fast, it's unnatural.
Yeah.
And you have to sit and say, wait, whoa, 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 wait a minute. Did we get the artwork? Did we
Mm.
find out the size of the bag? Did we determine, does it go UPS or does it go all these different ways? How does it get from point A to point B? We can't do it that fast. Something's wrong.
Mm.
And that probably in that instance, what's wrong is the customer is not educated.
Yeah.
So we have to actually deliberately slow it down. And I think younger people will not, they'll be like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Get the order, get the order. Well, no, no, no. This is a booby trap. You're not going to get it to them in 8 weeks. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And but with the younger people, I think the thing that is just so fundamental that I've noticed that they don't do is planning their time.
Mm.
This was my rule of thumb. If you have a big area, that you should always be planning 3 weeks out.
Hmm.
Now, what I would do is say, okay, I'm going to go, let's just say I'm going to go to Ohio. Who's my biggest customer in Ohio? Okay, it's ABC. I'm going to plan a meeting with them 3 weeks out. Okay. Now I'm starting, now what would happen is now I know I'm going to see them in 3 weeks. But I had done that 3 weeks before on the one that's next week.
Hmm.
And as that 3 weeks is approaching, I'm filling it in regionally. I could go see this guy, that guy, this guy. Now, so for what's coming on next week, this week I am confirming.
Hmm.
Hey, Joe, I'm coming next week. Remember we talked 2 weeks out, the mold is starting to get set.
Yeah.
And that third week out, I have some anchor calls.
Mm.
Now, can you just keep that rotation going? Because that also means now what you need to do is say, ooh, but I have a trade show to go to in 6 weeks. That breaks the pattern. Okay, well, it breaks the pattern.
Yeah.
Or that also means that, but there's that one territory, which is Michigan. I don't have any clients. Well, you know what, buddy? But if I go out there, I'm going to go on 12 sales calls and my boss is going to yell at me for not getting any orders. Well, okay, then I guess Michigan's off the slates. And that's, I think, the risk of being a sales guy.
Yeah.
Are you going to take the risk to go out there to Michigan and say, I know my product, I've done my studying, I've used my AI to know what's going on in Michigan, and I'm going
Mm.
to go out there and I'm going to take the investment. This week is going to be worth it.
Mm.
How else do you do it?
Well, it's a good question. And as you were talking, I'm thinking just the organizations that I've worked with, how many of them are quite reactive to what they do? And they
Hmm.
tend to prioritize where the legitimate, tangible, quantifiable opportunity sits, and then they go and spend their time there. And not nearly enough of them do what you're suggesting is thinking in three-week cycles, or in some, the next three, four, maybe 2 3 week cycles, looking at the next 6 weeks and doing the research and saying, well, if I'm going to Michigan, how big is the market there? Who do I know there? How can I start to at least set up some discovery meetings? Because that's a prospecting segment that may pay dividends in 6 or 12 months' time. But if I don't do it, nothing's going to
It'll
happen.
never pay.
No.
It'll never pay. I don't know whether, I don't think I was, and this is something I don't know. I was not trained that way. It's
Mm.
just the way my brain worked. I don't know whether I don't know what it is, but when a mass of information came at me, I immediately started to think, how can I chop this up and make sense of it?
Yeah.
Because if you come into a selling business or you come into anything and every day is just a whole series of random events, what a horrible way to live your life. And I think there's a lot of people in business who show up and you say, what are you going to do today? And you'll hear them say, like, oh, You don't know. When you get in there, anything could happen. And my attitude is no, 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 no. There is, we can statistically tell you there are some things that are going to happen.
Yes.
And are you cognizant of that?
Yeah.
And I think if you don't approach your time that way, how else are you going to get any new business in Michigan if that's what your boss wants? If
Yeah.
you don't invest the time to
Yeah.
learn about Michigan,
Yeah.
you're going to wait for Michigan to call you?
Well, a lot of organizations do that exact same thing because they think, well, we've got a great product. Our marketing team are broadcasting, they're educating the marketplace, so therefore I just have to sit and wait for the phone to ring. Well, the reality is it's not going to happen. So you've got to go to where the opportunity is or where you think the opportunity might be. And this is where the planning phase becomes really important because you're right. It's what is the best use of my time? And here's the reality. You're not going to have as much as your sales manager might tell you, 100% of your time is not going to be selling time.
No.
And there's research to back this up that particularly in phone sales in particular, the amount of time that people spend on the phone actually selling is a very small percentage as compared to the day they have available to them to sell, right? So they have to plan. They have to think, where's the best place for me to focus my attention? Who should I be actually focusing my attention? And how can I maximize the time that I'm actually on the phone selling? So if you've got a territory, you've got to do exactly the same thing.
And in your experience, are you training people with that through
Yeah,
um, your
yeah,
training
absolutely.
and your consultation?
Well, yeah, you've mentioned before a lot of products have a reasonably long sales cycle. Now, here's
Yeah,
the other thing that organizations don't spend near enough time focusing on. They focus on their sales cycle and how their product gets to market and how they can get the revenue and secure the customers and get the loyalty and all that sort of stuff. They're not spending enough time asking questions to understand what is the customer's buying cycle. So does the customer's buying cycle, is that linked to seasons? So you're talking about nuts, for example,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So if there's only a small window, a season where nuts are harvested, then you've got to know when that is, and you've got to then work backwards to figure out, I've got to start conversations at this in this month so
yeah,
that I can give myself an opportunity to position that when the harvest happens, I've
yeah,
now got my product in a position where the buying
exactly.
cycle it now meets, right?
I can't remember what it is. It may be off, but like 75% of the peanuts are consumed in the last 3 months of the year between like Halloween and the year end. When
There you
everybody,
go.
the weather gets cold, the peanuts are a sedentary snack. They are something you sit at the TV with and there's a bowl and you chew on them.
Yeah.
It's not something you throw in a car as
Mm.
readily. Some do, but normally it's just not. That's something that the peanut industry was always trying to create was mobility within their snack
Yeah.
versus other to get away from that cycle.
Mm.
Oddly enough, in our market, and I learned this through the years, coffee is not nearly as cyclical as you would think.
Right.
You would think it's a cold weather product, but it isn't.
Mm.
If you look at it through the year, yeah, you'll get some surges when it's cold, but it's pretty consistent, and it's always like, isn't that interesting? People just suck down coffee. That was a huge market for us.
Yeah.
Um, but you think about other markets. Well, let's face it. If you're selling Christmas ornaments, I think we know what the cycle is.
That's right. Yeah, but those sort of companies would be then starting to think about, well, how do we incentivize the marketplace to start thinking about Christmas decorations in July or in April, getting
Yeah,
ready for
yeah.
that, right? So almost
Plus, you
creating.
have you would have at that point you would have if I were doing that, I would want to know quickly if I
Mm.
could with somebody, typically, what time of lead time expectation do you have for something? If it has to be there, oh, it's Christmas. Well, when does it have to hit your warehouse?
Mm.
Because you might say, oh, it has to be on the shelf by December 1st, but it's got to clear the warehouse.
Yeah.
And there's one warehouse. Oh, but there's three other divisional warehouse. So now if you're trying to learn a customer, in those questions are not ones that become invasive,
No.
as in, I'm trying to get your order. It's more, how can I help you get that whatever it is that's Christmas ornament in front of somebody in time for them to purchase it that would be to your benefit
Yeah.
as the
Yeah.
person selling
And
that.
and that's somebody really starting to think about the buying cycle, not my selling cycle.
Yes,
And you think about this, there are some industries, for example, fashion, and in some fast-moving consumer goods, there are designers and marketers working on uh, programs or working on seasonal products for 18 months into the future. So, thinking about Christmas ornaments, for example, there'd be
yeah,
people in organizations now working on Christmas 2027 in terms of what are
sure.
potentially going to be the trends. And so there's a longer sales cycle and therefore a longer buying cycle. So if you work backwards, this is where your planning and your segmentation becomes really important to say what sort of plan do I have to put in place to continue to educate and to get people to move through their buying cycle so that when they're ready to make that purchasing decision, we are the first person they think about because we've done that work.
Well, I think you're drawing a big distinction between what I think is a fair assessment of the wording is, tactical versus strategic selling.
Yeah.
And that is, and maybe my definition is a little different than others, but tactical is more, in my opinion, we're going to go in and get something done. We're going to go in and, it's very transactional. I'm going to get the order. Maybe I talk to Harry, Harry sends me to Susie, Susie sends me to Diane. Boom, we got the order. But what you're talking about there is more strategic.
Mm,
Imagine who are all those personalities. We're trying to get from 20, we're in 2026, the beginning of it, and we're planning for the end of 2027. And if you think about it, how many people will touch that decision
mm,
before you get there? And are you inquisitive enough? And not so much because you want to just make money, which you do, but do you have a general inquisitive desire to learn how does this whole decision get made?
mm,
How can I really be a part of it? And I think when you're selling or you're involved in something and you truly become a part of it, where you want to help the people and you realize, everything's going fine, but that guy Joe, he's going to bring himself in this thing sooner or later, and he's going to show up and he's going to throw a bunch of cold water on this project, and he's coming. And I think that's strategic selling, but
yeah.
it takes time to get there. That's understanding the flow of a company. Um, there's companies that here that I've worked with that were consumer goods clients. One was, take an example, I used to sell into the pet food industry.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you're selling to Ralston Purina, you play around with marketing and you'd say, oh, they want to do new this or they want to do new that. And everybody would say, production decides. Marketing can talk until the cows come home.
Yeah.
If they can't get 80 million bags out of the back of that warehouse, it ain't doing nothing. And I ran down the marketing crowd, and lo and behold, splat round right into production, and it was dead. The other side of the coin is when Starbucks came out early in the market, marketing ran it all.
Hmm.
It would just be like, we want to do this 12-ounce bag that has a whatever the hell on the side of the bag that says it's made in Nicaragua. And it would just be like, go buy machines and get it done. So they had this scattered production floor. But that's the way they ran their business.
Yeah.
How else do you learn that other than being a part of it?
Mm,
That's what I find a lot of times with these people who want to focus only on what's going on now. The question would be, well, how do we ever get there if we don't stop and plan it?
that's it. And even better is how do I get a customer or a prospective customer involved in the planning so it becomes a joint initiative. And
Yeah,
it's not to say we want it'd be great to have exclusivity, right? But if you're there to truly provide a service to their business that's going to help them either drive efficiency, save costs, increase revenue, share a wallet, whatever the case might be, and you do that legitimately, yes, you're going to get a benefit from that. But if you can do it as a collaborative effort and you're involved in the planning from the earliest stages as possible, then you're not necessarily guaranteed to get the deal, but it goes a lot in your favor that you're probably likely to get that deal.
yeah,
But if you also
you're getting close
recognize,
to it.
yeah, but the recognition then is if you do get that deal, then the work doesn't stop
No,
because
and
it's
then
what's next.
I've always thought that for anybody who's in the selling market or coming into it, that you have to sell from your gut, not from your head. You learn how to do it in your head. You learn all the, hit the ball, it's a baseball analogy or whatever, it's a curveball, it's a knuckleball. You got to learn all that. But
Mm,
ultimately in selling, if you aren't, if you don't really want to help the person out, like if you don't really want to, I think it's a harder thing to do.
yeah,
I mean, I always wanted to do good by the person.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I would make money, but I must say that wasn't my truly driving force. Wasn't just I got to make money on this. I got to make money on it. Um, there's an example that you just brought this up. We have through my life had handymen do work around my home.
yeah,
Nightmares coming in and wires all over the place. They can do this, they can do that, and finally, about 15 years ago we had a guy who came into my home and he did a job. Really nice guy, interacted with my wife, pleasant guy. Well, now I will wait for him.
yeah,
I will talk to him about things I want to do ahead of time. Why? Because I trust that he's going to do something for me and he cares.
yes,
And now handymen are coming all the time. You know what I mean? They're, can we do your lawn? Can we do your whatever?
yeah.
And I think, can you become that? And that's a hard thing to do in selling. But I think the best ones know how to do it.
Well, they do. So there's two parts to that. One is they have to have a level of patience, and with that patience, they have to be truly wanting to provide value.
Yes.
And the second thing is they need to have obviously a good service to provide, right? So you can't be a good person and not have a crappy service or a crappy product because no matter what, no matter how nice you might be, if you don't have a good product or service, then you're not going to get repeat business. But with
Everything
all of
stops
that,
there.
yeah, exactly. But the thing is, and you mentioned this, and I won't talk about the specifics, but you mentioned an example before we press record about how you felt there was a person within your life, your environment, who you had some feedback for at the end of last year, thinking it feels like you're trying to get money out of me, right? It feels like you're trying to tap your fingers into my pocket and get some of my hard-earned cash,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
doesn't feel like you're here to serve me. Now, if as a salesperson you're creating that impression, it lowers the probability that you're going to get a deal, but also lowers the probability you're going to get repeat business or referral business as well.
Yeah, I think it's they always say in selling, you're at a deficit. You're starting from a deficit
Mm,
because people think that they're nervous. It's a natural feeling when a salesperson comes to you that you are like defensive.
yeah,
Like, oh, I go into the store, what's the old thing? I go into a shoe store and the guy says, "Do you want shoes?" Do you go, "No, I'm just looking." It's like,
yeah,
no, no, you're in a shoe store. You want shoes. I mean, let's get real. The reason you say that is because you think I'm going to try and talk you into buying shoes.
yeah.
Well, I had a guy who I was telling you about this just the end of the year. We are talking about this upcoming year and things that I would be working with him with services. And I just said to him, every time I talk, I feel like the first thing that comes into your mind is how you can get more money out of me.
Mm,
And I don't know that you mean to do that, but that's how I feel.
yeah.
And when you feel it, if you are giving that impression to somebody, they can feel it.
Mm,
And I think that is very counter to creating a long-term relationship.
yeah. But if you
I
compare
just,
that, Mark, to the person you were talking about before in terms of the handyman that you would wait until he's
yeah,
available, do
yeah.
you feel that he's trying to do the same thing? Is he trying to get money out of you, or do you trust him to the point where I would probably pay a premium for what he does because I know he truly cares and he has a good reputation because he's proven that he puts his money where his mouth is because he does a quality job.
Well, I think with that instance, I barely ask him what it costs anymore.
There you go.
I just trust him.
Yeah,
If he came in, I said, "Oh gosh, fix whatever, a shed's
yeah,
all screwed up."
yeah,
And he said, "Yeah, I'll get to it." And I said, "Oh, well, when can you do it?" It's a couple of weeks. So, God,
yeah,
gee, I need it in a week. All right, I'll hustle up.
yeah,
And then I'm not doing, let me get 3 bids, let me get 5 bids. It's no, you're the guy that does it for me. And I know in my life in selling my product, which was repeat orders, I had people that bought from me for 20, 30 years,
yeah,
just kept
yeah.
buying. And why? Because they trusted you and you spent the time. They were once not a customer.
Yes. Now, for people listening to this, I want them to just pause and understand what you've just said. Because you said something really important there, and that is at one point, those repeat customers were not a customer.
Yes.
And this is where I think a lot of salespeople fall short. And maybe that's because of the pressure they've got from the company to continue to bring in new logos or drive revenue, because it's all driven by money, right? Not
Yeah.
necessarily by service. Was there anything that you did in terms of your planning or your approach or how you interacted and built relationships that ended up having such a loyal base of customers where they probably didn't even need to know the price? They just trusted you and because you always do the right thing by them.
That's a good question. Um, One thing I always did is always always inform the customer. Let me rephrase this. I wanted one thing. I wanted at the end of the day, when you go to bed, you're not worried about what's coming from me. Even if you lie down at night and you say, Mark's truck may not show up tomorrow,
Yeah.
you know one thing. At 8 a.m., Mark will call. He's not, I say bad news is like, what do they say, like fish and guests. It's only going to get worse if they stick around. So to me, whatever news I had was tell them right away, and let them know,
Mm,
something's going to be late. I wish I could change it, but I
mm.
can't. Confront the problem.
Yeah.
A lot of people run from that. And you don't have to celebrate your victories. Just because something showed up on time doesn't mean you won. You don't get pats on the back for doing what you're supposed to do.
No, that's right.
Just do it. And I do think it's so interesting you bring that up as what keeps them is I think I really wanted the relationship.
Mm,
I mean, I
mm.
wanted their money. That was obvious, but I valued knowing them and that
And
sense of being trusted.
I love that. And I think without putting words in your mouth or paraphrasing, I think people are pretty good. And you sort of alluded to this before when the person was creating based on the language or a feeling they were creating that you thought they just see me as dollar signs, right? They don't
Hmm.
see me as a partner. So therefore, my level of trust potentially in them starts to get questioned a little bit. But if you then build the relationship because of what it can deliver both organizations and both people over a long period of time, then the price equation now becomes more of a value question. So what value am I getting? My job is to provide as much value, more so than what you pay for. So whatever you pay for a
Yes.
bag or a product or a service, my whole remit is to provide you significantly more value than what you pay for, right? It has to be genuine. I also say that the sale also begins once the sale is made. So if people are
Mm,
listening to
good point.
this, and even if you're in a commodity type industry, think about this. Repeat business is good for business. Repeat business means it's less onerous on you to continue to have to go to the well and try to drive new business and new logos. So if you can invest in your customer and what you do after a sale is even more important than what you do leading up to the first sale.
Well,
Because
that's
that's where
that's
trust
that's
comes in.
that's service. I
That's
know,
service.
like I'll just throw an example at you for us. Oh, I need 100,000 bags. I need them right away. You get him 100,000 bags. Okay, now fact of the matter is he's only using 10,000 a week. Now he didn't tell you that ahead of time because he was
Yeah.
afraid.
Yeah.
Now you start watching the amount of that he's drawing down. Maybe you can say to him, gee, you don't need 100,000 the next time.
Mm.
Maybe we can split it and it's 250s.
Yeah.
Well, that's less money out of his pocket. But you're watching his inventory for him.
Yeah.
That's after the sale and
That's
you
it.
get to know it, or you learn that the people on the third shift are a mess and scrap goes up a lot. Well, can we run? Yeah, all these little intricacies that you learn about what goes wrong with your product after it arrives.
Mm.
And I found managing inventory was a huge issue. And many times, yes, the computer can manage inventory. I know it. But every one of us knows that any computer I've ever worked with, that they will make mistakes
Mm.
because, generally, even if they scan everything in, I know we had that at my business. And I can't tell you how many times I said to somebody, do we have any gold bags out there? And they went, yeah, we got 100,000 of them. And I go out there and there's 10. I don't know what happened, but it didn't work. And I don't think that basic stuff goes away.
No. No.
And so I think that I agree with you in that, but you have to want to do that.
Yeah. And sometimes going back to what we touched on in the previous time we were together, you've got to play the longer game. And that might mean you've got to be conscious of, okay, where's my sales cycle, where's the buying cycle, how many customers do I need to talk to? I've got to manage the expectation of my sales manager. But if you want a long-term viable business with great customers who become loyal, you can't treat them as transactions. You've got to
No,
treat them as partners.
I got a raise when I was 31. I was selling, this is horrible. It was selling vacuum packaging machines into the processed meat industry. So that means bacon, hot dogs. And I was doing it in Philadelphia, New York, and Boston into all the really ethnic neighborhoods. A very classy group of people. I mean, the F bombs were flying. You could not get less politically correct. It was actually enjoyable. That machine I had was a goddamn ship's anchor. Nobody would buy it. I mean, I couldn't get, I mean, I would in and out and in and out. At the end of that year, I was scared to death. I thought I'm dead. I was already got my feelers out for another job. They gave me a raise. And my wife said to me, "Oh my God, why did they give you a raise? You haven't sold shit." And I remember the boss saying to me, if everybody in this organization got the door slammed on their face as many times as you did, we would be billionaires.
Yeah.
And well, it's hard to find people that will truly go out and dig for business.
Mm.
And I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think prudent sales managers know they need that.
Mm.
I think I'm not in it right now, so maybe in the last 5 years that whole world has changed, but I don't think so. I don't think so. Businesses grow on new business.
They do. They do.
You
They
can't
do.
feed off. You look at these people. They look at a particular franchise. It grows. Is it growing because of just building new stuff, or is it
Mm.
getting year over year growth within a location?
Yeah.
And
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 why? And
yeah,
why is it
and
happening?
why?
Because then you
And
then you can start to plan more effectively then.
yeah, and I find if you are going to be in sales or sales management like you and I are, you better enjoy that
Totally.
because if it's
Totally.
just tedious and nightmarish, then leave.
That's it. That's
I
it.
mean, it's not meant to be that,
No. But also
you
be a
know?
person. excuse me, be a person who is of service, who
Yeah.
is there to create value for both your organization, but also your customers' organization. And it's not about buying loyalty, it's about earning loyalty through building connection, building relationships, which flips back. So I know we're just about out of time, but flips back to what we talked about at the
Okay.
beginning. You've got to build relationships, which means you've got to get out there and meet people toe to toe, nose to nose, right?
Yep. The
Which means
old,
you've got a plan.
and I think that, I've thought about a lot about listening and reading on AI. If you start, if you think about it really, so okay, you go in to see somebody or somebody wants to buy something and they've got all the AI. They got more information than you can shake a stick at, right? And they're ready to make a decision. But, and this is my logic, aren't they going to need somebody to help them differentiate? Like I talked to Chat GPT and they gave me everything.
Yep.
Now I have to pull the trigger. Okay, so and you know more shit than I know about anything, but do you know whether this person you're going to buy from is trustworthy? And I feel like I just keep thinking to myself, the goal of the new generation is you have to just I can't, I said it earlier, but like force your humanness into it.
Yep. Yep.
And the edges, a lot of it's getting filled. Like
Yep.
Amazon has, you are not going to force your person into buying toothpaste door to door. It's not going to happen. You know what I mean? These products have become automated.
Yes.
And if that becomes the case, well, then you have to get better at automating or whatever it may be. But if you're selling, you have to hope that your product cannot become just commoditized to the point where anything you have can just be bought with a push of a button.
I agree. I agree. And I think the more that we have AI, the more that we have technology infiltrating every nook and cranny of our lives, we're still going to create the craving for human connection. And particularly in products, maybe not toothpaste, but other products, other services, particularly services, you're going to have that connection because you can't do it
I,
all
I
automated.
I think so. I mean, right now we're on a digital. I mean, you and I are on a virtual. I imagine if you and I met, it would be a completely different experience.
Mm.
I mean, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know exactly, how tall are you? How big are you? What do you tilt your head this way or do you tilt your head? All those things that, you know what I mean? When you meet
Yeah,
somebody, you
true.
can't get there.
No, that's
And
it.
I don't know how, well, imagine this, I'm competing and you and I are only interacting this way, but you're interacting with another guy who's sitting in your room with you. I just think you're going to be more inclined to buy from the guy sitting in the room with you.
100%.
That's,
100%. It's just
I think.
it's true, right? Now, and I'll wrap this up in a second. I often talk to people about the hierarchy of communication, and the number one method of communication, if you can do it, is to face, nose to nose, toe to toe in the same physical location. So
Yeah,
if you can travel to somewhere, if you can do that, that's the best. That's the number one priority. The second one is doing what we're doing now. That is,
yeah,
if I can't be in the same, and sometimes the tyranny of distance prevents that. The
yeah.
next best thing is I want to be able to see you. So even if I'm seeing you from the chest upwards, I can still get a sense of eye contact, sensory acuity. I can see mannerisms and things like that. The third is voice, right? So I can only play with the voice tone. And the fourth is written communication. But what I say to teams, and particularly sales teams, is do not use your written communication as your standard form or your first form of communication because you cannot get context. You've got to try and as much as as possibly can do the face to face, nose to nose, toe to toe, because then you can get context. And then all the other things that you just spoken about, such as the body language, the all the other stuff, you can play with and you can actually recognize. So you're right.
I think that I love the idea that, you know, you can't get context in a written thing. Um, this is just an old guy problem, but I have had a hard time with interacting, and just because of the organizational aspects of it, is interacting over texts with people
Yeah.
because and maybe I just don't know how to do it, but it seems to me that texts are harder to organize and document,
Yeah.
at least at this juncture. Now, I'm
Yeah.
sure somebody will jump in and say, "No, you idiot, there's an app," and maybe there is. But I've found that thus far, when somebody is trying to communicate me with a text, something about it diminishes it.
Yeah. It almost dehumanizes it, Mark.
Yeah, it's like, wait, you're in here with my wife and like I kind of like this delineation,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think that I think that I think that's a challenge for our next crowd coming along. How do you draw that? How do you pull that apart? The whole uh the concept of, you are at this point in your life, or where you are working, is you are a person who is a professional person here. You are
Yeah.
not exactly the person you are when you're at home.
That's it.
And can you force that not to just get mushed together?
That's it.
I
And
think
that's why
that's
it's
Go
exactly.
ahead.
And that's why I say that the human element is going to be the differentiator because a lot of the younger generation, and I just use my own children as an example, they're in their 20s. They would much prefer to order things online, do everything self-service, do things through text or WhatsApp, and they don't want to necessarily talk to people face to face, right? Now,
Mine
that's a
too.
generational thing, but as a salesperson, you're going to have to get used to the face-to-face communication because that's what's going to differentiate you against everybody else. You may not like it, but that is what's going to separate you. So get used to it. Now, you may not like it outside of work, but at work, you're going to have that conversation.
Well, I'd say if you want to make money in the selling world, that's a reality.
Totally.
I mean, if you want to be, that's the whole question of your career. If
Yeah.
you want to be somebody who's doing analytics in the background, if you want to don't be forward facing, then that's okay.
Yeah.
But we're here talking about selling. And if you don't find that, and it's hard, there's not a lot. I mean, meeting new people subjects you to, insecurity, vulnerability, rejection, but it's not as horrible as it tends to be painted.
No,
It
no.
isn't, especially if you get just used to it. It's no big
And
deal.
and for people listening to this who maybe have been fed the story or the narrative that the technology, the chat GPTs, all the AI stuff, it's the path of least resistance and it's the quickest way to an outcome, don't necessarily believe everything you're reading because it's not true. Because remember this, people want to still do
Yeah,
business with people.
I know. And I just keep thinking, you get all that information come flying in at you. How do you ultimately pull the trigger on an important decision?
Yeah,
Like, I mean, money that's going to be not, where you're going to buy your food tonight. I mean,
yeah,
something that's going to impact a company for the better part of a year because I bought a whole pile of crap from you.
yeah,
And that's,
100%.
anyway, something along
100%.
those lines.
Hey, Mark, it's been a pleasure having you back on the podcast. Always love chatting
Thank
to
you so
you.
much. Thank
Hopefully,
you.
people have, I certainly have learnt some stuff and certainly reconfirmed in my own head some of the stuff that I'm talking to clients about. So,
Cool.
thank you
Cool.
for that. For people who wanted to connect with you, my friend, where's the best place for them to
Well,
do
I
that and
think the
learn more
best
about you?
place is I have a podcast called The Mark Howley Show, MarkHowley. That's really not as much selling as just career based, how different people found their careers. I also happen to be somebody that I went through alcohol and drug addiction when I was a young man and have remained sober. And I put time into that to introduce people to that subject and people who have succeeded through tough times and other things. I'm just always fascinated by what people do in their careers
Hmm.
and what motivates them to do it because I was so motivated to do what I did.
Yeah,
And I met so many others who weren't,
yeah,
but they ended up being content. And that just intrigues me. So I hope if somebody'd like to hear a little bit about that, check out the
love it.
Mark Halley Show.
I will put the show notes in that, and I'll also, if it's okay with you, I'll put your LinkedIn handle as well, so people can
Sure.
connect with you on LinkedIn also.
Please do. Please do.
Mate, absolute pleasure to have you back on.
Thanks.
Have a phenomenal 2026, and
I
no
will.
doubt we'll be
I will.
talking again. Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.